Welcome back to another GCNTech video where we're going to dive deep into the subject of what makes a bad chain lube. As you can see, we've got a special guest, Josh Poertner from Silka, joining us as, I'm going to say you're the tech expert on this, probably known as Mr. Marginal Gains.
The lube father.
So yeah, we basically want to pick your brains on all things chain lube. Right, so imagine you're walking into a bike shop. I'm presented with a wall of different options to lubricate my chains. Some say wax rin on them, some say dry, some say wet, some let's say oil. Where the hell do we start to give people some information to differentiate between them?
The easiest way, without selling my own stuff too much, take anything that says dry or ceramic. All of those sources have the dry lubes as the worst. And typically if a lube says ceramic as a category of lube is typically using like a boron nitride particle additive. And those are almost like little like ceramic rocks in the lube. And I think the idea was that it would act like little ball bearings in there, but it just doesn't work at all. So it tests high in wear and it tests high in friction.
Which is bad.
Both of which are bad. So dry lube, and I think we've talked a little bit before, traditionally is only about 10% lubricant, right? It's typically like a PTFE or some sort of solid lubricant in a solvent carrier, usually like a pentane or a heptane that's like a fast evaporating. They're also high friction, they're also high wear, but even worse, I put them in this category I call the environmental hand grenade. It's bad stuff.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't last very long, so you have to use more of it more frequently. The whole supply chain behind making those families of lube are just bad. And so I just say for all of those reasons, I would just wipe them off the table and not look at anything that said any of that on the front. And then that really leaves you with wet lube and wax.
When people are deciding whether or not they want to wax or wet lube, one of the first things that people think of is like the spectrum of performance. Let's call it watt savings. So if we place like all the different lubes on a scale, what are the sort of watt savings of each different sort of methodology?
So the sort of standard for talking efficiency is the Friction Facts really started it with their test as a 250 watt input. And from there, we talk in terms of how many watts are lost to the lubricant. With the hot melt product like this, you're somewhere on the order of 4 to 4.5 watts of loss. So that's really about as good as it gets. I would say 3 products, the Silka, the Rex, and the Ceramic Speed are all going to be kind of together in that 4 to 5 watt, call it, range.
Yeah.
And then you go to a product like the Drip-On Super Secret. This is chemically the same stuff that's in here. It's just been high pressure emulsified into water as a carrier. The downside of water as a carrier is that it is slower to evaporate than a solvent like heptane or pentane. And so instead of getting that 10-minute flashing off, you need to let it dry for a few hours. But you are only giving up about 0.3 to 0.4 watts using this lube over this one. The other thing we talk about though is single application longevity. And a wax like this, you're probably in the 300, 350 kilometer longevity. Here, you're probably more in the 250 kilometer longevity. So instead of hot wax, part of the beauty is 100% full of wax after, inside the rollers and pins. Here, you're getting to, call it 60 to 70. Now, if you do 2 applications, right, you now fill 60 or 70% of the void from the first application. So you can get into the 90, mid 90% range with a couple of applications of a product like this. And so, again, 4 to 4.5, probably 5, call it 0.4 different. Something like our Synergetic product is 100% synthetic oil with the same high pressure additive package that these products have. And that's only about 0.2 of a watt slower than this. So, and then from there, you probably from the best oil to the worst oil, you have about a 2.5 to 3 watt delta.
Right.
So from something like, Synergetic to, I think it's Park Tool has a fairly high viscosity oil. I can't remember the name of it. It's about a 3 watt range. And then in the middle, you've got, all the products.
Hundreds of options.
Hundreds of options, yeah.
So if we were to say, sort of like top step is a hot melt wax product, and then the lowest option where we've got, say, 3 to 4 watt loss, where are we looking as a worst case scenario, do you say?
So with an oil, your worst case, you're probably in the 7 range. And then if we get into the dries, like I said, the worst lube ever tested was a dry lube by Friction Facts, and it tested out at a little over 11 watts of loss.
Okay.
In that same test. So
significant.
A pretty big spread.
But not only in terms of watt loss, because maybe people watching and go, hey, do you know what? I don't want to go really fast on my bike. That's not what bothers me. But what coincides with that is that it's friction, and then therefore it's wearing and wear at your chain. Yeah. So not only could you potentially go slightly faster, forget that, your chain and products and components on your bike are just going to last longer.
But it's good to know people can now see the savings, different methods of lubricating your chain, and people then can decide how much time they have or want to devote to it versus the trade-off of if you're just doing it for maybe you just do it for a big race and the rest of the time go around with a good wet lube.
An interesting way of looking at lots, because you've said there's so many different options out there, and some of them are marketed in certain ways or try to make themselves look different from other brands. Do you think there are any products out there which the actual component itself, say the oil or whatever the lubricant is, has remained the same for a number of years, and really it's just starting to get repackaged up each time?
Yeah, there's a lot of what I would call legacy brands who are doing the same thing they were doing 30 years ago. And some of that tech, I think particularly some of the fluorinated PFAS chemical tech, 30, 40 years ago, that was cutting edge stuff. I mean, that really was an improvement at the time, but the technology's marched forward. And so I think having better modern testing equipment, I think having, Adam at Zero Friction bring in his whole kind of changing the worldview from friction to wear was, I don't think any lubricant company in the industry would have thought to make that step. But now that we have him, I mean, what an amazing resource.
So the other thing that I want to factor in is, in terms of lubricant choice, is the environmental conditions that you ride in. Unfortunately, we live in the United Kingdom, which, I mean, I don't know if you've seen outside today. Well, I know you have. That's typical, right? It's gross. It's not just wet, it's dirty. So at that point, if you're someone who's riding a few times a week, what are you saying?
I still land on the side of wax, and I commute to work every day on an e-bike with my little dog Rico in the basket.
I've got a picture.
You got the Rico sticker, but
there he is. There he is on the laptop.
We have our e-bike. He has a little basket for the front, and it's about 6 miles each way. We ride in the rain. I wax my chains on that, but the biggest reason I wax my e-bike chain is that the rest of the bike stays so much cleaner. I feel like the time spent waxing, I actually get back when I clean the rest of the bicycle, because the seat stay, chain stay, the cassettes, there's just so much less work with all the other stuff. I mean, you give it a quick hose off, and you're really done.
Just to be clear for the viewers, what I mean by that is when you wax chain needs a new application of wax or some drip-on wax applying to it, because you can hear the chain. It's no longer silent running. It's getting noisier.
For someone that's maybe not au fait with all of the different reasons behind this, why? What's the main reason for that? Because we're talking about how dirt can stick to the chain. Are we talking about applications? How do they differentiate as such?
Yeah, so I mean, if you think, just starting with oil, we are now, technically, we now have 5 types of oil, according to the industry. And these type 1 would be like your mineral oils. And then you think of, if you're car people, the synthetic motor oil, that was type 4. So we essentially had types 1 through 3, naturally occurring, or things that we mine. Type 4 was the first of the synthetics, and we now have a type 5, so it's a next generation synthetic. And that I know of, I think Synergetic is the only type 5 oil in use in cycling today from what we've tested. And, it's expensive. And so, you still have, products out there based on type 1 through 3 oils, right? You have some type 4s, you have blends. Some people, to get the cost down, or maybe for some other performance characteristic, usually cost, they're blending the oils. You have vegetable oil products that are out there. So there's some really environmentally conscious brands trying to use pure vegetable oils, and they actually work, pretty well.
Oh wow, I was amazed. I thought you were going to say they didn't work so great.
Yeah. So one of the problems, one of the best lubes tested from a friction perspective in the wet category is olive oil.
Amazing. I was about to ask. There was a true story, right? I was doing a Gran Fondo in Italy, right, once. It was before I was, into waxing. And I put some dry lube on.
Oh, no.
Right? And it rained. And my drivetrain was completely all washed off straight away.
Yeah.
And I needed to relube. So I just popped into a little cafe and asked them if they had any olive oil. And I proceeded to cover my chain in olive oil, which quietened it down, and it was actually all right.
It works.
Great for the environment.
What was my what loss?
You're probably in the 5 to 6 range. I mean, not bad.
I'll take that.
Not bad. But the challenge with like your olive oil is it goes rancid and it doesn't adhere to the metal, right? And so then you get into the additives, right? So now you're adding something that maybe helps it stick to the metal a little bit better. One of the problems we've seen testing oil-based products from different brands is there's a thing you can add called a tackifying agent to make it sticky, and it helps it stick to the metal a little bit better. And in clean environment testing, it makes the product look really good. But as soon as you get into the dust, that tackifying agent makes it sticky. And so, dirt that lands on the outside of an oil-based lube can be stirred into the inside of it. And so as soon as it gets dirty, you see this really accelerated. But yeah, where we are today is pretty darn good. And it's significantly better, talk about legacy products, than where we were 10 years ago.
I've got a couple quick questions, actually, just to try and round this off. What are some ways that people can look at trying to identify products which they feel like are going to offer what they actually want? Because it's easy to just walk into your local bike shop or shopping online and go, the first and easiest way people are going to try and categorize good from bad is perhaps the price. Whereas, forget about price, how can they be steered towards certain products that might be better suited for them? Is there something they can look out for in terms of the ingredients, what's used in it?
So there's really no ingredient disclosure. In Europe, you can ask for the SDS form, and companies are required by law to actually publish them. And so if you're doing some internet research, you can get an idea of what's in there from that SDS. If you're buying a lube, you want it to be 100% lube. And if it's made into some pretty color and it has some fun smell, well, that means that had to be added. And so do you want your lubricant to be 5% food grade dye and food grade fragrance? You probably not, because it's not doing anything to help with the chain. The other thing I would avoid, and Adam at Zero Friction, he's really probably where you should start any internet searching on lubricant. Go to Zero Friction Cycling and look at his data set. But one of the things that he's talked a lot about and proven in his data set really over and over again is all of the products that claim to clean and lube at the same time don't.
We've got some really cool information there that hopefully lots of people can take away and action into how they approach maintaining and buying products for their bikes. But also, you've got to just take into consideration, on top of all of this information, the best case scenario for your chain to the worst case is not really that bad in the grand scheme of it, I guess. And you've got to weigh up the time that you want to spend maintaining and meticulously cleaning and lubricating chain versus riding it. And for some people, that trade-off just isn't enough. They're like, do you know what? I don't care. I just want to ride my bike. And that's fair enough, I think. But if you are someone like the three of us that is big into this stuff and wants to take it seriously, there are some really cool products out there that can help you go faster and make your stuff last longer, which I think is a great thing.
Yeah.
There you go. Heard it here first. Let us know in the comments section down below your thoughts on all of this, and it'd be good to hear what everyone has to say.
Agreed.
Yeah. Cheers to the lube father.
Yeah. Cheers, Josh.
I'm going to make a hat or a t-shirt.
I would suggest not wearing that hat.